Now let us consider the dispatch requirements for Etops. Each airline's MEL must specifically identify Etops items. The FAA Master MEL identifies Etops constraints by using the abbreviation ER. For example, Item 24-00-2 of the Master MEL lists Etops dispatch requirements for an inoperative APU-driven generator. Not all the MEL items are this obvious. Consider the air-driven pump. This item may be inoperative, provided the HMG is not required. The HMG is required for Etops only if one of the other three sources of AC power is inoperative. Therefore, if one of the engine generators or the APU generator is inoperative, the HMG is required for Etops. If the HMG is required for dispatch, the air-driven pump may not be inoperative. Your airline is responsible for identifying all the possible Etops dispatch requirements in your own MEL. The Etops entry point is the point on the outbound route which is 1 hour flying time at the approved one-engine inoperative cruise speed from an adequate airport. For our flight, this occurs at the highlighted point. The entry point is sometimes included on the computerized flight plans. The flight plan should also identify the Etops critical points. A critical point, CP, is the point on the intended route where the diversion time from the two closest Etops alternates is equal. This is sometimes referred to as an equal time point, ETP. The critical point location is typically listed on the flight plan by latitude and longitude or distance from a waypoint along the intended track. These critical points can be entered into the FMC as additional waypoints to assist in position monitoring. To legally dispatch an Etops flight, the weather at the planned Etops alternates must meet the requirements for a suitable airport from 1 hour prior to the earliest possible arrival time until 1 hour after the latest possible arrival time. The earliest possible arrival time assumes the diversion occurs at the first critical point for the airport. The latest possible arrival time assumes diversion from the second critical point for the Etops alternate. The flight plan should list the Etops suitable alternates. The final Etops dispatch requirement is the critical fuel scenario. The critical fuel scenario ensures that in the event of a diversion, there will be adequate fuel available to fly to the en route alternate airport. The critical fuel scenario assumes a pressurization failure at the critical point, followed by an emergency descent to 10,000 feet and a subsequent cruise to the nearest en route alternate. At the alternate, descend to 1,500 feet, hold for 15 minutes, missed approach, then approach and land. The critical fuel scenario includes a 5% allowance for errors in the forecast winds and an increment for APU fuel burn. The critical fuel scenario fuel calculation must take into account the predicted weather conditions, such as hotter than standard temperatures and possible icing conditions. The calculated critical fuel must be increased to account for any performance deterioration. If the airline does not track deterioration, a 5% allowance must be used. The critical fuel scenario must be checked for both all engines operating and with one engine inoperative. The larger fuel requirement must be used. The all-engine critical fuel requirement is calculated at long-range cruise speed at 10,000 feet. The one-engine inoperative critical fuel requirement is calculated at the chosen Etops speed at 10,000 feet. If the critical fuel required at a critical point is greater than the scheduled fuel on board, the required fuel load must be increased.